Okay, so for this part of your thought primary, you're going to evaluate some arguments for the existence of God. And you're going to begin by reading three very classic pieces of philosophy. All three are very short, and I would encourage you to print them out rather than read them on your screen. Print them out so that you can mark on the paper, you can underline things that are important or pose questions that you may want to remember to come back to later in our discussion board. I also encourage you to read these out loud. Bring your ears to the game. It'll make it easier for you to get through the sort of archaic grammar that you might find in a couple of these. So read it out loud, and don't freak out if something doesn't make sense. Just see if you can follow the general line of reasoning that these three are offering. They all come to the same conclusion. They all come to the conclusion God exists, but they get there in wildly different ways. So see if you can see their different strategies for getting to that conclusion. When I was considering readings for this topic, I initially gravitated towards some of the stuff that's been written in the last 5 years or so, because there's been a really interesting collaboration between physicists and philosophers on questions about free will and on questions about God. And then I realized that if I gave you something that's been written in the last 5 years, it might be easier to read because it's in a vernacular that you're more familiar with, but it would deny you what I think is one of the coolest things about philosophy, and that is it's an opportunity to literally be in the mind of somebody who may have existed a long time ago but was grappling with the same questions that you are. Okay? So you have a couple of pieces here that were written 1,000 years ago. Think about that. 1,000 years ago, these two probably sat down in what was a cold, damp, dark room and thought that the ideas that they had in response to the question you're exploring were so important that it justified taking the time to write out their ideas with a feather, right? So just kind of as you're reading these and as you're listening to yourself read these, know that you're in the mind of somebody who existed 1,000 years ago, and you're wandering kind of through their thinking on the same topic that you're grappling with right now. So kind of try to enjoy that experience, and hopefully it's not too frustrating because the language is a little clunky. All right, so after you get done reading those three very short pieces, you'll have this little quiz on there that you'll probably complete as you do the reading, because that's where all the answers to quiz questions are. And then you're going to click this link in step 4, evaluating the arguments for the existence of God. And a document will come up, and you want to make sure that you read the directions for this assignment really carefully. And if you have questions about it, just email me. But essentially, I'm asking you, hey, rank each of these arguments on a scale of 1 to 10. If it's a 10, it means I think this argument is rock solid. I may not agree with the conclusion, but I think the reasoning process that this person used to get to the conclusion is pretty interesting and reliable. But maybe I give it a 1 and I think, oh my gosh, this is not a good argument at all. Okay, so there's, 4 or 5 arguments here, and you're just going to score each one of them. And you want to make sure that you do this, and you want to make sure that you have your scores handy as you watch the lectures, because we're now going to go over each one of these arguments and look to see what's good about them, what's strong about them, and what's weak about them. All right? So make sure that you do that. Otherwise, the lectures won't be nearly as fun.